industry has, man, it contributes so much to a global economy, creates so many jobs for people.
Right.
What is unfortunate about that is that, it's often gone very much unregulated and just not enough actual policies in place to make sure that the people who are maybe not on the forefront or like the magazine covers, people that are actually making our clothes and like in the background doing the proper grind are actually taken care of. It's also notoriously not an industry that's known to pay people well. You work a lot in fashion and it's exhausting, and sometimes you're just like, am I doing paid enough for this,
Hello, molweni bhotane mawethu namkeleke kunkqubo yethu namhlanje, and thank you so much for being here. Welcome to Bad Nihilist. Today I am so excited. When I say I'm excited, I've got one of my oldest friends here, my girl Nelly. To you, she is Nelao the Almedia, an amazing human being, but not just an amazing human being, an exceptional human being, incredibly talented fashion merchandiser. I'm talking, she has worked for every brand, honey. H&M, Adidas, Tommy Hilfiger, the Daily Paper. What's the other one? I don't even know. You've worked all over the world, Portugal, Amsterdam. Where have you been? Stockholm. I don't know, everywhere. London. She is an all-round powerhouse. So welcome, Nelly.
Wow, I'm honored. What an introduction.
Stop this imposter syndrome thing. I feel like she's not paying her success, this one.
I'm so excited to be here. First of all, thank you for this platform, girl. I'm so proud of you. So proud of you. We've come a long way, and man, it feels like such a full circle moment sitting here together having this conversation. So,
girl, I am so glad, because when I asked you to write for this, I just thought since we graduated high school, over the last 10 years, the topic I'm about to discuss today, which is fashion merchandising and your love letter to fashion merchandising. It's something we speak about all the time when we catch up. So I think firstly, Nelly, introduce yourself, tell everybody about who you are and why you got into this career and why you wrote the piece that you wrote. Just briefly, please tell everybody about who you are as a fashion merchandiser.
Okay, how do I lead with, or how do I follow from that introduction? Well, as you said, my name is Nelly. Well, most people will know me as Nelao now, especially professionally. I grew up in Namibia, in the capital city called Windhoek. Not many people are from there. The whole country has 2.6 million people. It's a small place. It's a real small place.
Girl, don't even downplay it. Namibia is gorgeous.
It is beautiful. It is, honestly, gorgeous place. But it was small. And growing up, I also grew up in a suburb called Katutura, which is one of the most impoverished suburbs in Windhoek. It was funny though, because my life always felt like this contrast. My parents were so big on education. They were like, that was the number one priority. Everything else can take the bench. They spared no expense at that, and also came at a lot of sacrifices.
Right.
So as much as I grew up maybe surrounded by poverty, I guess my life didn't really look like that. I did have the chance to go to the best schools, and my parents also, thank you so much for this, considered travel as a form of education, which I think opened up the world to me so much. It started at home already, growing up in a multicultural household, recognizing that the world was quite vast and that there was so much out there bigger than maybe my little bubble would suggest. But I went to school in Windhoek, went to some of the best schools, and then also had the chance to go to boarding school in South Africa, which is where we met, and I'm so grateful. But life was definitely a paradox. It was always this feeling of having or feeling like I had access, but also looking at the world around me and thinking, wow, this is so different. There was even as a kid, I knew already how much of a privilege it was to have that access. And, my dad always used to say, no one can take your education away from you. Like when you learn something, that is yours to keep. And I think
And it comes in different forms, just as you said, with travel,
exactly.
meeting different
Yeah.
people. That's so interesting because it's such your first like commentary now is just like a stark reminder of the large inequality that we have in this world, not just in like Namibia, in South Africa or wherever, but just in the world, like the capitalist society of take and consumerism and just like vast levels of this big gap of like the haves and have is just so stark. So yeah, thanks for actually pointing that out.
No, definitely, definitely. And already from that, like, you know, you just know, you also see the grind that, you know, your parents put in for certain things. And already from a young age, I knew that there was no way I wasn't going to use the access that I had to kind of carve a path that made sense for me. I mean, I didn't know that like growing up as a kid, but it got to high school when we were graduating high school. And I was just like, I was a bit lost, you know, because the advice was the same that you hear in most, I guess, African communities growing up. You tend to go for the career that is most sensible or traditionally the most lucrative, which is finance, it's medicine, it's maybe law. And I was like, I just don't resonate with
career paths. Yeah.
Exactly. And I was like, I don't resonate with any of those. I was just a bit lost in the source. And like everyone at that point, we finished high school in December and then people were going to university in January. At that point, I was like sitting at home. My dad was like, okay, like, what's happening, girl? what are you doing?
Yeah.
And, you know, it was my mom who found this course in Manchester, fashion buying and merchandising. And she was like, you love fashion, you love business. And I just never imagined that those worlds could come together. I was like, this is really wild. But also like fashion was not something that I explicitly expressed that I wanted to do that. So it was so crazy for me how my mom made that connection. And I'm so grateful because wow. So I applied for this course and I got in to what is now known as the Manchester Fashion Institute. And I started off with a foundation year because I wasn't really sure which like facet of fashion I wanted to go into. And we had the opportunity to try a bit of like, you could either go into fashion promotion after this foundation year, or you could go into fashion buying and merchandising, or you could go into design. And it was so great to have the chance to try each and every one of those. In the end, I ended up going into fashion buying and merchandising. But it was, yeah, you know, there was a lot of excitement, but it was also very, I was very aware that this was a world that I walked into where I felt other. I just felt
you are
very, yeah, like as an African Black woman, I was like, okay, yes, you are not the majority here.
But I imagine that it gave you such a unique perspective into the coursework you were doing, because when I think of these fashion institutes in Europe, I think very exclusive, I think money and just a very select few, if you could. I don't mean to, but that's the image I get, especially when I think of the fashion schools in these big countries. And it's also interesting that you had to go do this degree in Manchester. Were there options available here on the continent? Or like what the indication? I mean, you know, was it just something you knew you had to do, you and your mom?
Yeah, that was the thing. You know, I already, funny enough, when my mom found this course, like they already knew that I was not keen on staying in Namibia or going to university in South Africa, which would have been the next option.
Yeah.
And the opportunities to do anything in fashion were just not there. Like you just didn't have as much access as, you know, I guess jumping ship and going or moving over to, you know, Europe had. Like not only was the education a form of access, but it was also just like being able to work in retail stores. I remember when I got my first job, I was so excited. I was like, it was always my intention. I was a sales assistant or shop assistant at a brand called Russell and Bromley, which is like very British
Yeah.
heritage vibes. And
Yeah.
I felt so on. I was like, I can't believe this is happening. Like, I remember being so excited about this
Mm.
first like retail job because it made me also, I just, when I got into fashion, I also just felt like I had no idea about it. It was my always the intention from the beginning to like get to know this industry that I'm about to, you
Yeah.
know, essentially make decisions for and have an impact on from every angle. And I was so amazed that there were so many angles already. I was like, what? This is
Right.
crazy. You can work in retail, you can work in head office, you can, there's so many ways that you can find yourself in the fashion industry. And I think that's what fascinated me from the beginning as well. I was like, oh my goodness, there's so much to keep learning.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, that was, you know, then studying in Manchester doing my fashion degree there. And in between, I got the opportunity to do what we call like a sandwich degree. So I had the opportunity to take a year out of university to do some internships,
Mm-hmm.
which that was for me like I was like no brainer. I get to travel, yes. And at the time, for a year, I went to Stockholm and did an internship in assistant buying at H&M in Stockholm, which was,
Hey.
you know, I was like the first real head office opportunity that I had. And then after that, I went to
Can you
Adidas
imagine?
in,
H&M is a huge firm. That's a huge
yeah,
company, a
it
huge
was big.
brand. Yeah, I can imagine you learned
It
so
was
much.
big.
Sure.
I felt very small.
Girl,
I
I
felt very
understand
small.
because you're one of us at the
Yeah,
headquarters in Stockholm at H&M.
yeah,
You look like
yeah,
you're one of us.
yeah.
So it's, I don't
It was
know.
crazy.
That's interesting that, you know, you felt small, but I wonder what it's like now in retrospect, like given how much you've achieved now versus then, you know?
It's crazy to think about because yeah, so after that I stayed there for 4 months and found that okay, you know, I was so happy to have the opportunity, but it didn't necessarily resonate with me and the direction that I was going into either, which was also a good learning point. And then there was a chance to go to Adidas in Germany, which was so
Yeah.
great. Like that was also amazing. I just, again, different level of access to people and seeing so many different types of jobs in the fashion industry. I was like, this is crazy. Like, whoa,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know. And after that year, got to come back,
Mm.
do my final year in Manchester,
Mm.
and you know, we had the chance to like do either like a business project or like as a form of like a dissertation, or you could have gone for the exam route. And I'm like, yeah, of course I'm gonna create my own little like, you know, business solution.
Sure.
And that's I think the red thread throughout my like education in fashion as well was sustainability was such a big thing for me.
Yes. Yes. That's always been
Coming
the thing,
from
sustainable fashion.
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
oh, that's always been the thing. And you did your dissertation on this.
yeah,
And now that we've
yeah,
introduced you and your foundations and how you ended up in the fashion merchandising space, I think it's a good segue actually, since you've mentioned sustainability, to like move into my next question, which is you and I have had lots of conversations about sustainability in this world of consumerism, in this capitalist society of wanting the next best thing, fast fashion,
yeah,
how it also contributes to the detriment of our actual environment. When I say environment, everyone, I'm literally talking about the earth. I'm talking about
yeah,
climate change mitigation strategies. I'm talking about how devastating the fashion industry is to the environment. And also the second point, the like dirty side that we often hear about fashion around like exploitation and just there's things that are associated with fashion, which is like the glitz and glam, you know, you see models and these
yeah,
beautiful designs, but I think there's also like a dark side, which you explore a lot.
yeah,
So yeah, I want you to talk about that because I know you've worked for fashion weeks. I know
yeah.
you were recently working for some of the biggest companies that I want you to touch on. And like, yeah, what you see, what the solutions are, what the problems are, what these value chains look
Yeah,
like. Yeah,
yeah,
you, Nelly.
yeah. I think it's amazing that you even asked me to do this piece because it came at the perfect time. It came at a time where I was also considering like, or like thinking about what am I actually doing to do better in this chain, right? If you look at fashion, like you so well mentioned, that I think it's mostly associated with the glitz and glam, and like it's got that outward appearance of always being so pretty and like, it's a great industry to be a part of. But on the other side of that, I think because of how superficial generally it's perceived to be, it's been held accountable on that same level, right? That over the years, this industry has, man, it contributes so much to a global economy, creates so many jobs for people. What is
Right.
unfortunate about that is that, it's often gone very much unregulated and just not enough actual policies in place to make sure that the people who are maybe not on the forefront or like the magazine covers, the people that are actually making our clothes and like in the background doing the proper grind are actually taken care of. It's also
Right.
notoriously not an industry that's known to pay people well. You work a lot in fashion and it's exhausting, and sometimes you're just
Yeah.
like, yeah, am I being paid enough for this,
Because
so,
no one associates government policies, reform, legislation, regulation, words that are usually associated with other industries. People don't really associate it with fashion.
yeah,
What you're saying is there's a need for that. And while I
definitely.
guess international law and certain countries have practices in place, I know you've often said that it's still not enough.
Yeah, and I think I'm so hopeful now. You see a lot more people putting pressure on that because they recognize the impact of this industry, right? We create so much, and there's so much waste that also comes from like just not having proper processes in place to understand whether do you need this product, how much do you actually need of it. There needs to be better strategies, and then not just exit strategies that we're just going to push this product over to like an outlet store to be sold at a discounted rate if we didn't get to sell it at full price. I mean, like better ways of looking at how we actually create product and offer product to
Okay.
people,
What does
right?
it mean?
um
Or
I
what,
would,
like,
so
can you give us
basically,
examples?
yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think when we look at the product development cycle, it is so vast. It takes so much to get a single product from concept to consumer. There are multiple facets to that and multiple people involved in that process, right? You have from the initial concept, the designers, the buyers, the merchandisers, the salespeople, production, who all work together to ensure that that product, one, is right for the consumer, is the right price, is from the right suppliers. There's like logistics that go into place, manufacturing, and all of this often happens anything from 6 months to a year and a half in advance of even launching this product, right? So a lot of decisions need to be made so well in advance, meaning you got to be sure. And we're not always sure.
Okay.
Um, so it starts from there, really, of having these multiple stakeholders working on this product. And, there's so much work that goes into that. And what I think is often a miss, or maybe it's something that there's a lot of discussion about what the fashion cycle looks like right now, that it's actually not even the best type of cycle to implement sustainable measures. You're
Okay.
working so far in advance, there are different considerations that you need to have. There are certain things, depending on the certain size, or like depending on the size and the reach of your brand, there are certain
Mhm.
things that you need to implement. And there's so many books out there about like design thinking and like how to actually from initial concept to consider what the end product would be, and what a real um, perspective or real strategy would be to actually like, okay, how much will we be left with at the end? What is a different solution other than just pushing like leftover stock into different kind of like outlet stores, or
Okay.
but I think yeah, what comes amiss is this, like, we create without really thinking about what the end product will look like and how that will impact essentially, yeah, where does it go? You know,
No, I think
we
that's
don't really think about.
important because I've heard stories, and I know you've also shared with me about how devastating some of these consequences are, where luxury brands will burn clothes. That is
Yeah,
that's just like an obscene and just like vile consideration, at least for me.
yeah,
Because all
yeah,
I think about is you've got this product, you've made, say, 200 of them, and only 50 sell. So instead of like this going to, I don't know, becoming more sustainable cycle where they're given to the less fortunate, or I don't know, they're used next season.
yeah,
It's like, it's insane to me. And I think this contributes, I think, to like fast fashion and all those things.
yeah,
What are the solutions to those things? Because this, like, again, that consumerist mindset is crazy to me.
yeah,
The way we look at fashion and everything. I mean, I don't think it's even,
yeah,
I think like the latest iPhone, people
yeah,
want, when I think of like my mom's garments from like the 1970s, she still has some of those dresses and I wear them now. I think
and
that's
they're gorgeous. But honestly,
in
what,
this like modern culture, right?
yeah, yeah. I think, what's quite interesting about the whole discussion of sustainability is that it's one that needs to, it's again, it's such a big discussion, right? One could argue that what is one sustainable measure for one company might not necessarily work for another. What I mean by
Okay.
that is that it could be an approach to say that, yeah, we create garments that last, right? And it might not hit all boxes of what maybe is regarded as widely sustainable. It might not be made from recycled materials or these kinds of things. But if a product lasts, surely that's more sustainable. So it is a really complex conversation to have. What I think is, I mean, for one, as a merchandiser, which is part of like this reckoning moment in my career this year, is thinking about what it actually means for me to be a more sustainable merchandiser. Like what ways in my processes have been inefficient, or have I just disregarded that it's not
Yeah,
something that I'm
that's so
really ashamed to
interesting.
say. Like it's not something I approach my range building processes with, for example. And that's something that I need to start considering, because I'm like, yeah, but there has to be a better way that I can
Yeah,
actually design. I need 5 t-shirts. Maybe I don't need 5 t-shirts, but right now, the way the processes are set up, it's not something I consider. And it's
mm,
personally like, it's something that I feel a lot more a good pressure to start thinking about, and
yes,
creatively also collaborating with other people
yeah,
around me who maybe have a bit more knowledge to share on different ways on how we can approach this together. I think inherently the fashion industry is an industry that requires so many different types of expertise. To have different perspectives, look at something and say, this could be a better way to build a way forward, I think is the only way. Like, I'm
yeah,
not going to sit as a merchandiser and come up with the
yeah,
one
yeah,
whole solution. But
yeah.
I think it's conversations we need to start having already from initial concept creation. Right before you create that t-shirt, it's saying like, okay, like where is this gonna end up? And does
Yeah,
it make sense? You know what I mean? Like
that's
how
so
many of
interesting because, like, I'm wondering then, like, what at a practical level, you're talking about the idea of changing practices to make it more sustainable, but like, what do those look like? Because in my mind, in this world of social media, fast fashion, in a world where everyone is trying to look the best and, have the latest item, if you're seen with a certain bag, it's like, oh, that's so last season. That is like, you just
yeah,
put I don't know, these big brands that like a single bag is like 50,000 rand, and
yeah,
you can't wear it for long because someone, you can't be seen with it again. And I think, like, I look at like the influences, and it's not also their fault. I mean, it's a way to make money in this economy. But then as a buyer, as a merchandiser like you, then what the companies you work for also want to have a bottom line. I know you've worked for huge companies like Tommy Hilfiger.
Yeah.
They have designs every season, whatever these companies are. So what then is there's investors, some of these companies are publicly traded companies. There's people who want to just have a bottom line and sell. So
Yeah.
how do we bridge that gap? I know I'm asking a question that's difficult to answer. I don't think it's only on the fashion industry. I think it's also on us as consumers, what we demand, how human beings relate, how we are, people compare. And I don't know, this is turning into a bit of a philosophical discussion, but like, as I'm listening to you, so many things are coming into my mind about how this is just such a flawed system as a whole outside of fashion. And I want to get your thoughts as a buyer, as a merchandiser, you know?
Yeah, I think it's any society will always have sartorial needs, right? We always want clothes. Like that need is we're not gonna go back to like days where we just wore animal skins. Like, and if that happens, then okay.
No one wants that. I don't want
that. It's not right now. If that ever happens.
I'd like to not feel pressured to buy a slightly different shoe 3 months from now, just because it's there and I end up not wearing it for 5 years and then it ends up in a handful. I don't know, you know what I mean?
So, I think, there's a purpose to every brand, right? Like brands that are also selling at scale and at large, if you think of like the H&Ms and those, like they also have a purpose in society to be able to offer different levels of society clothes, essentially, right? And I think depending on the brand, depending on the scale, of course, the level of accountability becomes like, you need to also look at it because there's levels to these things. I guess for me, it's a big question mark at the moment, and that's something that I'm trying to answer. Trying to find better ways of how to do my job. And like, I think it's, I'm so happy to have this question on my plate right now. It is so present. It's like, it's there. And I'm like, okay, I can't ignore it.
I think the fact that we have people like you in the industry thinking like that is crucial, you know? If there's minds like you thinking about this, I, as the consumer, I'm going to start changing because you're the decision maker and I'm just buying, you know? You decide what I buy. Actually, we think we decide what we buy, but actually it's people like you who decide what I buy.
Which is, I think that's it. I think it's holding that responsibility with great care and recognizing that you are a tastemaker, especially if you are a part of that value chain somewhere. And that's the part that I got to this year where I was like, okay, I do recognize that I have some kind of influence, right? And I might be in the background. I'm not the one doing any of the marketing campaigns, but I also get to build the framework of a collection. And I'm like, I think that is something that needs to be held with care and also, done with a bit more consideration, which has sparked a new realm in my career where I'm trying to learn more and look at things more creatively by also talking to people who don't do what I do and trying to figure out, is there anything that I can implement that comes from there here that will make things better? So, I'm
making conversations a little bit more intersectional and multidisciplinary and all that. So okay.
I think we need that. We're in a time where not just one person who has one skill set will solve the problems we have today. We need to start asking each other and saying, yo, what can we learn from each other to actually create better industries and better ways of doing things.
So Nelly, I just want to say thank you, and I want to ask you for any final thoughts that you want to share before we wrap up. Like, what do you think is, what are your okay, let me not ask you what you think the solutions are as well, because we've discussed them, and I think asking you where we start is too difficult, but maybe let me ask what your message is to the person who's listening to this, who has now just found out about this extraordinary value chain and system, and how deep it stretches. Yeah, like what are your final thoughts?
Um, hmm. I guess, I mean, I think my message is more so a reminder that no matter like, yeah, we're all a part of some kind of like a value chain, right? And no matter where you find yourself in that, I think to know that your work has an impact and some level of influence, I think it's great. And I think it's amazing to hold that responsibility. But beyond that, I mean, if we look at the fashion industry and like just especially if I think about my peeps back home and like just the designers and pioneers who are trying to do something in like different African countries and like trying to build up more infrastructures where there's just we have our own.
Yeah,
I just
yeah.
want to, it's so possible. And it's like, I'm not saying that because I feel like I've reached any place where I'm like, oh, this is it. It's more because I'm still navigating this industry and I'm recognizing how many opportunities there are for us to actually like, yeah, like highlight maybe a part of the economy that hasn't really been highlighted, especially in African countries, the artisans, the designers, like art hasn't always been a discussion that is, or like hasn't been in the discussion when it considers like how to build stronger economies and that kind of thing. And I think fashion has a tremendous amount of opportunity to do that. And so I'm just hoping like in the next coming years, and maybe I hope to be a part of that too, is just building and also offering more access to
Yes,
people to
and you
get
will.
into. Yeah. Yeah.
Really, you are
Um,
such a talent. You're so brilliant. I think you're doing amazing work. And the fact that I know now you've just decided to also branch out and do your own like sort of freelancing and like do your own kind of work to become more sustainable. And I think that's amazing. You're a brilliant person. And thank you so much for being here today. Thank you to everyone who's watching right now. I'm so thankful that you tuned in. Yeah, come back, like, comment, subscribe, ask questions. Nelly will be more than happy to answer anything. If you've ever thought about fashion merchandising, if you've ever wanted to be in this industry, if you have more questions on sustainability, I know my girl Nelly will gladly answer any of them. So I'll say thank you for now and see you next time. Bye.
General attitude is that you should be grateful to be here. And that's even more nuanced, especially if you then are someone who comes from a minority world, maybe a third world country, that you already show up in these environments with those kinds of ideas in your head, right?